Wilson, and this is another Storytime lesson. The purpose of these lessons is to help build storytelling skills and inspire some story ideas, and it would work for adults and children. Today's lesson is about writing what you want to know. So we talked about writing what you know. Now let's talk about writing what you want to know. And that just means, what kinds of things are you interested in? What, topics would you like to learn more about? Maybe you heard a question or did some trivia about a subject and it kind of intrigued you and you want to learn a little bit more about it. Things like that are all great ways to inspire a story. Something you're interested in, guaranteed somebody else is going to be interested in as well. So if you, find a topic that you think, wow, that's kind of interesting, I'd like to learn a little bit more, doing that research and learning a little bit more for yourself can actually lead to writing a story. When I was a teenager, I went on a trip with our guiding group, and we stayed at this school gym. We all slept in the school gym, just a bunch of teenagers hanging out. Beside the school was called Battlefield Elementary, and beside the school was an old graveyard. And of course, being teenagers, it's cool to walk around graveyards, and it was pretty interesting. It dealt with some soldiers and Laura Secord Monument, all based around the War of 1812. And it really fascinated me, and I wanted to learn more about the War of 1812 and that specific area, that obviously a battlefield. It was obviously a battlefield, that's what the school is named after, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. So I did a little bit of research and did a little bit of, nosing around, finding out more information. We drove around the neighborhood a little bit more, found other things to look at, to learn about. I researched, read books, all that kind of stuff. And eventually what it led to was my first book, which is Ghosts on the Soccer Field. And this is a chapter book for kids. It's a pretty quick read, but it was based on the idea of this school that was built on the site of a battle during the War of 1812. And so I wrote about the battle within the story. Now, it's not a nonfiction, it is a fictional story, but the facts that I used were accurate to the research that I had done. And the ideas, were sort of based on this foundation of the things that I learned. So as you're learning about things and researching about things, it can actually lead to story ideas. This whole story wasn't, brought out of that research. I still had to look for characters and ideas and things like that. But the idea of these ghosts haunting the soccer field of the school, to me was kind of a cool thing and could offer a lesson. And so this is, sort of about dealing with bullies and things like that. And the ghosts were there to sort of provide a lesson, or at least make you think. Whether they were there or not, isn't really defined, but it gets you kind of thinking about different things. And so that whole idea of where it takes place and the idea of the ghosts was inspired by first the graveyard that I walked through when I was a teenager, and then later by the study I did on the War of 1812. So it goes to show that I wanted to know a little bit more, and as I learned a little bit more, it got kind of interesting, and I kind of wanted to share those interests, and it worked in creating a story. Now, Cindi, who is the author of Fish Patty, sort of had a similar experience. She studied marine biology in high school for a couple of years, and it just made her enchanted with the ocean. She loved everything about the ocean and everything in the ocean, and she went a little bit further into understanding more about the ocean in things that she read and things that she watched. And so she was one day watching a show, and it introduced a porcupine pufferfish, which she thought was a really cool fish and would possibly make a really cool character. So it led her to doing some more research for about 6 months, that she studied the porcupine pufferfish and the environment that it would live in, and then created some story ideas for Fish Patty. And so Fish Patty has a character of the porcupine fish, and although it doesn't take place in the ocean, it does deal with an aquarium, and it starts in an aquarium store, and then it works its way into the big aquarium, like the aquarium museum type things. And so it, again, the research about the ocean and all that led to the ideas. It doesn't mean that the whole book is full of all the research and all the information. It just means it inspired the story, and it evolved into a story and a character and things like that based on first her interest in the ocean, and then her, watching shows and reading books about the ocean, and then doing further research to create this character, because apparently porcupine pufferfishes are fairly friendly fishes, and so what great character if you want a friendly fish but a porcupine pufferfish. So that's kind of fun. So that's Fish Patty, and that's a great story. Cindi has another book about a lonely palm tree, and in that story she talks about the coconut and how it travels through the ocean and plants itself and then becomes the tree. And that's like my favorite part of that story. And again, it's based on, what is the significance of the coconut? How does that become a tree? Or where does the palm tree come from? Just all those kind of questions that you wonder about. And then when you look into it, you think, wow, that's a really neat idea. That's something cool that I could work into a story and share that knowledge with others. Because, if you think about it, kids read books over and over and over and over again, or we read books to kids over and over and over again. And so that's information that's going to be embedded into their heads, and it's a perfect chance to give them a way to learn. So even though it's a story and it's fictional, if we throw in some of the knowledge and facts from the research that we've discovered, we're going to help them learn along the way. We can help them learn about life cycles, about types of animals, about history, science, all those kinds of things we can incorporate into the story. So it doesn't have to lead to a nonfiction, although that is perfectly fine as well if you have a lot of learning and education in a certain topic and you want to create a nonfiction book based on that experience and knowledge, then that's great as well. But even if you're just creating a story, having that research kind of gives you those answers and those things that you can determine. You can look things up and go, oh, that's kind of a neat idea. Or so, you read something and you went, wow, I didn't know that. Maybe that's something you can, work into the story as, something the character reads. In Ghosts on the Soccer Field, the kids do some research because they come across the graveyard. And the one boy has already seen the ghosts, and he kind of wants to know, where do these ghosts come from? So they do some research about the war that took place in that geographical area, and so then they can learn more. Now, it's just sort of a side note as they are trying to decide where these ghosts have come from and what these ghosts are doing, what they're trying to say, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't, the war doesn't really bring itself into the story at any point, but it's part of the inspiration to the story, and so including it gives them something to go, hey, I want to learn more about that, and maybe they'll do their own research about the war and things like that. So your activity then is to think of a couple of topics that you enjoy and that you want to learn more about. Write some questions about those topics. So, if it's a war or if it's an animal, maybe it's a superhero. Maybe it's a weather, like, tornadoes or tsunamis. Maybe what exactly causes all that, and start asking some questions about those topics. Then do a little bit of research so that you can get the answers to those questions, and then take all that information that you've just gathered and see how it might fit into a story. Does it inspire study? As you're doing some research, do you come across an interesting character? Can you use that character or an inspiration of that character in the story that you're writing? So, for example, if you're doing some history and you come across some interesting historical character in the War of 1812, Laura Secord was an interesting character. There's been lots written by about Laura Secord, but she could inspire a character. So she, she heard a secret and she wanted to tell that secret, and she had to kind of run through the woods and in order to find the person to tell the secret. So it was quite a bit of an arduous adventure for her. She nearly didn't survive, and so there was quite a lot. What a great adventure story that would make. And we don't have to use that, well, this is Laura's secret. We just kind of use what she went through as inspiration for a character that maybe is running from someone, or is maybe trying to get a message to someone, and has to go through all these obstacles. So it doesn't have to translate exactly from the history to the story. It can just inspire the story idea. So I want you to, do some research, ask yourself some questions as to what you're interested in, what you want to look up, and see if you can find a character or a story idea, or even something you want to look further into. So maybe as you're looking into one thing, like how Cindi was looking up, about the pufferfish, and maybe she came across some really cool information about another ocean character. And so maybe then, after she's kind of done the research she wants to do here, she can go off and study this other character, and maybe that'll come in a later book, or maybe that will become this book at all, or be part of this book. It's hard to say where these ideas come from, and it's great to keep a vault of all these ideas so that when you are writing a story, you've got characters you can draw from, settings you can draw from, situations you can draw from, facts you can draw from. So, keep it all, whether it creates a full story or not. But as your activity, do a little bit of research and see what kind of story ideas you can come up with. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us for this Storytime lesson, and I hope you join us again for our next Storytime lesson.